a lot of times in the past when we realized a schedule has been impacted, it was tough to identify why.
So how good are you at predicting a 6 month project on a day-to-day basis?
Leveraging technology just allows you to do more with less.
You're trying to manage projects and be in the field or do all that. It's so difficult to update Microsoft Project.
Change is never easy in any organization. It feels even harder sometimes on the construction side.
It's a team sport, and it's not only developing and maintaining relationships with the clients, but also our trade partners as well.
So this engages everyone from the beginning, and just a different collaborative way of thinking about getting the project done.
We'll often hear that there's no budget for the technology.
That's easy. The cost of Outbuild is a drop in the bucket compared to a couple of days delay on a schedule.
Dave, Nick, good morning.
Good morning.
I love to start like we usually do in those conversations by getting a bit of a background on each of you. What got you into construction? Tell us about your story. And if Nick, you want to start.
Yeah. So Dave and I are both principals at Taurus Builders. Taurus Builders is a commercial general contractor in Denver. We specialize in restaurant, office, and retail tenant improvements. How I got into construction, I've been interested in construction for as long as I can remember. Really, growing up, enjoyed building things with my hands, and the satisfaction that came from building. I never really considered anything else as far as a career goes. I have my dad's cousin is a superintendent or was in Denver, and he kind of lined me out on how the projects are managed, what's involved. And then I went to coming out of college, out of high school. I knew that I wanted to go to college and study construction management. So I went to Colorado State, and from there I went to work for a general contractor out in California for 13 years, and then a couple developers after that. Always with the intention of wanting to start and build a company. And then I partnered up with Dave, longtime friend since elementary school, and we've been doing projects in Denver ever since.
Awesome. What kind of projects did you work on in California? That's where I had my run with the general contractor too.
Sure. Yeah. No, I lived in the Bay Area. I worked for a company, a medium-sized general contractor in California, throughout California, 3 offices, and we focused on a lot of the same stuff we're doing now. TIs, a lot of office and retail, a lot of the same stuff we're doing now.
Awesome. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I've been in construction pretty much my whole life. I've never really done anything other than be on a construction site for going on 20 plus years now. I kind of got my start in the mountains in Colorado as a framer and a carpenter, and kind of grew up in the field and seen a lot. I've done a lot of different things, but yeah, it's fun. It's like Nick says, I think it's important, to me at least, to have something like tangible that that you've built, and that you have something to show for everything that you do. And that's just exciting to me that we have a lot of fun with it. It's always a challenge every day, especially in the field. I've been focusing, I've spent my entire career in the field, and the challenges every day are always, solving problems and figuring out ways to make things work. And that's always fun to me. Every day is a different adventure.
Do you drive around and tell your kids, look, I built this?
Yeah, they've seen it. I mean, she's seen a lot of it. She's my daughter Harper has been spent a lot of time on construction sites as well. She's I bring her along with me quite a bit. So I think that she might be the next generation. She loves it. It's pretty interesting to watch her. So maybe she never had a chance either.
That's awesome. My they're builders in my family too, and whenever I go home, my grandfather would show me. I mean, he's been building in my hometown for 60 years, and it's like, oh, I built this at that age, I built that at this age. It's
Yeah.
a fun feeling, and when you get to, because it's so hard, it's a hard job, and you have that accomplishment of I built something. Look, I'm proud of it. Like when you
Yeah.
Yeah,
spend
absolutely. All your hard work and effort go into something that you can, that people are going to benefit for years. It's so rewarding.
how long have you? When did you start Taurus Builders? By the way, the company.
Taurus has been around for a little over 10 years now. And it kind of has grown. We've been very, kept our growth sustained for the last, man, we really were very mindful about not overcommitting ourselves and slow growth and making sure that we, always take care of our clients and that we've never overextended ourselves. And we've grown this to the point where now, doing 10 times the amount of revenue that we did 10 years ago. And it's pretty exciting.
What drove that success, you think, as far as starting a company is never easy. So being able to start it and growing and get established in a market like Denver, I'm curious what drove that success for you too.
To me, I feel like just consistently performing to the best of our abilities and continuing to have the highest level of craftsmanship and just communication with our clients and really developing those relationships that have created more opportunities for us, mostly off of referrals from existing clients that has
Nice.
really helped grow our company, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned relationships, Dave. I mean, that's a huge part of this. It's a team sport, and it's not only developing and maintaining relationships with the clients, but also our trade partners as well. So um, we find the partners that we like to work with and understand us, and that's really where a lot of our successes come from.
So that is it. And maybe I'll tie into the technology piece. We're also talking about Outbuild, but other type of technology. I know there is a lot of technology out there, and there's some that you need for your teams that are helping you achieve those goals. How did you approach finding the right technology to support your team? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, technology is huge, especially for a small company that when we're starting out help us, run a lean company. Leveraging technology just allows you to do more with less.
Because we often hear, because we sell to all, and we work with all types and size of general contractors, and often on the size that you're in, what we call the small and medium businesses at that size, we'll often hear that there's no budget for the technology because they are small companies, but the ratio is the same, right? You could do smaller project, you need the technology, and your margin might be slimmer because you might do smaller projects. But I'm curious on how did you approach that? We need to spend money for us to be successful, and what were your priorities as far as the technologies you needed to implement?
Yeah, and again, as a smaller company and starting out, you really uh, you see the benefits of technology, and and if you weigh that compared to labor, to hire somebody to, as an example, manually input a lot of information. There's a cost associated with that, and so if you use that for technology to make it, more efficient and less of that, manual entry, it makes you or those two can balance each other out, and then once you add more people, you become even more efficient.
So there's a time component to it that's the way you could see it, as far as, if I save X amount of hours to my team, and then now if I have a team of 10 versus a team of 50, you just exponential benefits on that end.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, you talked about the success in what you do, and I'm certain that delivering projects on time is probably the number one, with, of course, safety and quality. But you have customers that are expecting to open a restaurant or a business, right, that needs to start at a certain date. So before Outbuild, how were you managing, the scheduling and planning piece, and what processes were you exposed to?
Yeah. So prior to, Outbuild, we did, all our schedules were through Microsoft Project. And, we would, put together a master schedule, and then, we would adjust that as the projects, went along. And then we'd filter out, 3-week schedules, and then we'd send those out to our subcontractors. And so that was our process prior to Outbuild.
How was that? How successful was this? So, what challenges did that create? You had your master schedule in Microsoft Project. You might have been using something different to manage the field. Like, how was that going with the teams?
It was not successful. It's hard to do. It's not easy to work with. It's difficult to relay, and just keeping it updated all the time, and taking that extra time, like when you're trying to manage projects and be in the field or do all that. It's so difficult to update Microsoft Project, and it's just not it's not an easy, like, for a lot of, speaking for guys in the field, like, most guys in the field aren't the most technologically savvy, and so it's not easy to work with. And so this, changing the way that we think about managing these schedules and projects is just a totally different way of thinking now. And it's, so far, it's been awesome.
Nice. Who was, before managing the schedule? Was it typically a building schedule project managers, and then superintendents would have input as far as updates, or we see the Excel spreadsheet running somewhere because they need to track something? What was that the process before?
Yeah, I mean, we typically, the project manager would manage that component, as far as putting together the schedule. The majority of it would be put together by the project manager with the input of superintendents. But yeah, little or no feedback from subcontractors, the ones actually, doing the work.
We hear a lot that, it feels like holding hand, like the GCs would say that a lot. We're holding hands a lot to our trade partners. And it feels like there's also a big component of the way we were set up on job site, by giving, a piece of paper or having to constantly feed them information, is not very engaging as a subcontractor. Yet they make or lose money based on the people that are on the job site at the right time and having the material on the right time. So was this something that, I mean, in you guys' experience, did you feel like it's been always a struggle, to get subcontractors engaged on projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that we and, the industry in the past has done it is, again, we as the general contractor put together the schedule, we send it to the subcontractors, maybe get some feedback on that, but typically not. And then, that's the schedule that we're committing to with our clients. And then the schedule that the subcontractors are committing to, through our contracts. And, and how most of them, didn't spend too much time looking at it, just basically, looking at their line item and their duration, but really not thinking about the whole schedule and how it flows, and how, they're affected by other trades. So it just seems like a really outdated process, as far as, us providing the schedule without the input of the guys that are actually doing the work. And if we do get feedback from subcontractors, it's typically from their office, who really doesn't understand, the details on, flow of work, and how that relates to other trades.
And just executing their own scope of work. It's different. Sometimes there's a breakdown between the office of what they're actually even doing. So this engages everyone from the beginning, and just a different collaborative way of thinking about getting the project done, instead of us being like, this is what you're going to do and you have to get it done in this amount of time. We talk to them and say, how are you going to get this done? And how are you going to get this done with everybody else together and keep everything flowing? It's just such a more collaborative approach to getting all this done, and it empowers the subs to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and to participate. I mean, Dave, you've been running crews on the field, from what you are telling me, and you never like being told what to do, especially in this industry where that superintendent on the project will know less than you as a trade contractor.
Exactly.
You specialize in your trade. What would you say? And before we get to Outbuild, I like to ask that question. The previous setup with Microsoft Project, Excel, the disconnect, no collaboration, lack of engagement. What would you say was the biggest impact to your operations to have that setup? Was it causing you loss of time, of rework and delays? Like, what would you say was the one thing that hurt you the most, that then drove you to look at another solution?
It's schedule impacts. Whether that's efficiency in how the work was managed, or whether those impacts were design related or client driven, and knowing what those impacts were, and the associated delay, and communicating that to the team. That's something that when we realize, a lot of times in the past when we realized a schedule has been impacted, it was tough to identify why. And so, that if we can't, ask for a schedule extension, that turnover date is not going to change. And what we see in a lot of our projects is, a sprint to the finish line, which means, trades working on top of each other, and then, concern with quality, just to make that date. And it can make for a very stressful end of project, and the client sees that, and is affected by that as well. And it's we've seen that often on schedules, and so with Outbuild we can identify roadblocks. We can the whole team is involved, as far as the design team, the client. All of our trade partners can see those roadblocks and what's affecting the schedule in real time.
What about you, Dave? What would you say was, on your point of view, like maybe more field focus, as you were saying, was the main impact of the previous solution? Like the things that might have kept you up at night because it felt like
I think that the things that we didn't have before Outbuild, or that were the biggest problems to me, are, so there's obviously some disorganization, due to lack of communication between trades, between the office and the field, between, like, this just brings everything together in one thing that everyone can see. Everyone can see it in real time, and they can see what's going on. They can see what's coming up. They can see how the submittals are tracking. We can see if something's not going to be on site on time. All of the things that just completely changes the way that the project communicates from all the different people from the design team to the guys in the field that are doing the work. So I think it just improves the communication and the transparency of everything that's going on, because before that we didn't have that organization, and now it's very obvious that this is the way to go.
That's awesome to hear. So did something happen on the project that prompted you to look at Outbuild? Like, how did you come across Outbuild and wanting to make a change? Because change is never easy in any organization. It feels even harder sometimes on the construction side. So what motivated you to want to implement something new?
For me, it was just consistently coming down to the end of projects and missing key components to things that, like Nick said, trades all over each other, overlapping all their scopes. It just creates more opportunities for damage to other people's work, to other, just things not flowing right, especially to the end of these projects when we have such compressed schedules in TI projects like this, that you have zero room for there's zero margin for error on these things.
You don't have flow.
Such a tight schedule,
Yeah.
And so to be able to see everything in front of you and to be able to have a live document, I think is very beneficial.
Yeah, and most of our projects have relatively short schedules, 4 to 6 months. So if anything affects those schedules, it's really difficult to recover. So we need to run these projects very efficiently. And so we identified project scheduling as a big opportunity for improvement within the company, and we set a company goal of additional Microsoft project training for the team, which seemed like a very easy goal to attain. But the options out there for training on Microsoft project, either online or even in person, are very limited. So we spent, this was a quarterly goal that pushed a couple quarters trying to find good training, and really didn't come across anything that was worth doing. And then and during this process, Dave came across Outbuild, and as soon as I looked into it, I'm like, that's exactly what we need. Not only is it is it software built by construction people, but it's also, focusing in on really how schedules need to be collaborative, between the trade partners and the GC, as opposed to, the rigid, traditional
dictatorship.
Yeah, exactly. And so, not only does Outbuild offer training and, good videos and great support, but it's also a different way of looking at project schedules from a collaborative approach. It just makes all the sense in the world. As soon as I looked into it a little bit, like I said, it's exactly what we needed.
How different is it from what you used to do before, like on a structural basis, between the schedule and the look ahead?
So with Outbuild, we try to minimize the tasks in the master schedule and focus more on the tasks in the look ahead. So the look ahead is much different, because you're not just filtering out the master. You're taking an activity, an overall duration that you break up into detail, and as long as that ties back to the master on the overall duration, you're able to move tasks around a lot easier than you can in Microsoft Project. And you know, you're thinking about that as you're collaborating with everyone involved, and those people take ownership in their commitments. And you know, that's a different way of, you know, approaching, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
we hear often. We have training every week with Mike Wong, and he always says, you know, we're changing behavior here, and that really makes you think. You know, this is something new and different, and um, in a good way um, to make these projects more collaborative and get the input from the guys that are actually doing the work.
Yeah, we hear it often that when talking to companies that will build a detailed schedule, the look ahead is a filter. And our question is always how good are you at predicting a 6 month project on a day-to-day basis? And all you do
Yeah.
then is playing catch up on, oh, everything's going to
Yeah.
change. So why putting the effort? Just sequence it out. You know, you could give milestones to your owners and we'll hit those milestones every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. But then we'll figure out what we do based on the information we have for the next 3 weeks. I can't promise that in 6 months I'll install that door on that floor, but I could promise that we'll be, you know, done with a demo maybe on that date, and done with the entire fit out on that date. And those are milestones that make more sense. It's just, and like you said, Nick, it's you know, there's a behavioral change, there's a bit of a change, and that brings to my next question: is how did you handle that change within the company? It's never easy. People don't want to change, even if it sounds like the tool might be awesome. So how did you approach this internally to get your teams excited about, okay, there will be some pain, there will be some learning pain, but here's why we should do this?
You know, I would say that Michael Wong has been amazing in his support and his training with our team. Like, you know, we've had, like Nick said, we have had our quarterly goals of Microsoft project training and all that, and everyone struggled with it. Everyone, you know, especially the superintendents and the field guys, they struggle with it. And so it just makes it so much easier. Like, it's such an easier tool than Microsoft Project. But man, Michael Wong, his support and his training, and you know, we've had a dedicated hour with him once a week for the past, what, 3 months now. And his support, and he's gotten our team excited about it, I feel like, more than anyone, because he makes it easy.
The great thing about Mike is he enjoys this. Like we can't do, you know, a weekly training with everybody for months, but what I'm guessing is he's enjoying working with your team so much that it's something that he looks forward to every Friday, probably, to be like, oh, let me see how Taurus is doing, and I want to help those guys out.
It's great, and everyone comes into it with a, you know, they might have a list of questions or things that they're working on or whatever. Or how do I make this button work, or how do I do this, or, and he has an answer for everything. And it's not just about the, you know, the technical aspect of it. I mean, it just creates so much conversation about changing the way that people think about this, and talking about how to get subs engaged, and it's more than just the technical aspect of like running the software. But you know, it's cool. I think that's helped our team get behind it, is Outbuild support.
We often get compared, people that don't spend the time evaluating, saying, oh, you know, we just like Microsoft Project, a little different. And it hurts us inside a little bit, but some people just don't, you know, scrape the surface. But if you were to tell another GC, you know, that tells you, you know, oh, Outbuild is just like Project, what is different to you than, you know, what Microsoft Project provided you versus what Outbuild has been providing you? How would you describe it?
I think the biggest thing is the collaborative approach, you know, as opposed to, you know, if someone's thinking through and coordinating with other trades, that's a different way of looking at it, as opposed to, I just got to be done with this area by this date, right? and then they get into it and they say, well, the electrician hasn't finished here yet, and those guys haven't even communicated yet. So it's certainly the collaborative approach that sets it apart from what we've done in the past.
I also feel like it gets the subcontractors engaged before they show up on site. And a lot of times in the past with just a, you know, a Microsoft project schedule or whatever we're using, these guys would show up on site and not be prepared and not know what they're doing. And so this gives the office side for the subcontractors, you know, time to think about it with their own team of how they're going to accomplish their scope and get it done with everyone else. And so they show up on the job knowing what they're supposed to do before they get there.
How did you introduce this to your subcontractors? We often hear that the tool sounds great, but the superintendents will never use it. The subcontractors won't care. You know, people in our industry are a little defeated. They feel, you know, it's never going to change. But how did you see success, and how did you approach this with your subcontractors?
So we just went through a round of pre-con meetings on a couple of projects, and so we'd started it Outbuild on a couple other projects, tried to get some sub involvement, but we knew that the beginning of a project would be the best time to introduce it and walk through it with them. So we had meetings with every subcontractor on these two projects. And so, and a big part of that was talking about scheduling and outbuild. And so we introduced it in those meetings. And when we walked them through, how it works and how the look ahead and the planning components work. And we made it a requirement of the project. We wrote it into our contracts that all the subcontractors would participate in Outbuild, and that was really the how to kind of introduce it to them and let them know that that's how the project was going to run, and that they needed to be involved with it. And so that's kind of the first step. So that's usually the office side of the subcontractors that we're talking to. And so now we're, and then the next step is getting, the field teams involved. So, most of the time those subcontractors are to talk to their foreman and let them know that we're using Outbuild, and they would have a license, and that they would need to be involved. And then, so at least they know what it is. And then, we rely on our field teams to help with, help those, the foreman, in the subcontractor meetings, discuss the schedule, look at it in Outbuild, move tasks around and durations. And then from there, we're really not to the point yet of getting total buy-in from everybody. But once they've, the foremen have actually used it and seen how easy it is, I expect to get a lot more buy-in at that point. And if they realize, that it's going to make them more efficient, and that they're going to get through the job faster, and in the end, increase profits by reducing labor time. We expect in the future that subcontractors are going to want to work with us more than other GCs, because they know that we're running an efficient project, that we're taking input from them on schedule, and that it's highly collaborative on site.
Yeah, I would just add to that a lot of this stuff comes down to like respect and stuff like that. And in the past, if you're just like beating a schedule down somebody's throat that they've had no input on, and they're like, I can't do it, or they don't want to commit to getting anything done. And so when we do these pre-con meetings, we have a schedule that we've built, a high level schedule with all the durations. So we bring them in, say, okay, this is your whole scope. This is what we have in our schedule. do you agree with the durations that we have? This is your opportunity right now to add days to do this before you sign a contract. Do you agree with what we have in here? Yes, you agree with duration. Okay, now it's your responsibility to fill in the detail of how you're going to get it done. And it just creates, to me, you know, the respect that you expect on the job site, because that sub is the expert in their field and that's why we're hiring them. So why are we telling them how they're going to do their job? They need to tell us how they're going to do their job. And then they feel more validated. They feel, more empowered, and it just improves everything down the line to getting to the final product and finishing the project. Is you get the buy-in, and the guys in the field feel respected and validated because ultimately they're the ones getting it done.
And no one wants to work those last 3 weekends of the project and I have to be there every day, and just, it's been sadly accepted in the industry. Oh, we'll work, we can make up, we have weekends available, but your productivity doesn't go up. It slows down. People might get hurt. But we use that as the lag, right? As our buffer, the weekends. Great. We'll be able to make it up. I'd love to talk a bit about, so there was an initiative, an investment that you guys made into Outbuild that we know is more than what most people will pay Microsoft Project, because there's a different value offering, there's a support and training and so on. How did you justify, or we are going to actually make a return of our investment, right? We know that by investing, I don't know, $10, Outbuild will help us likely get that back throughout the next couple of years as we implement. So what would you say have been the most tangible benefits? Is there a story that you could tell around that saved us hours, or roadblock, or change order? Like, well, I'd love to hear something specific on the benefit side that you've seen.
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, what's the cost of general conditions, as schedules push, and, the additional time and, overtime cost for subcontractors. I mean, that's easy. The cost of Outbuild is a drop in the bucket compared to, a couple of day delay on a schedule. So that to me is easy to justify.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's all about extended general conditions or being stuck on a project. I mean, what we're paying for Outbuild for, we could burn through that in one project by being stuck for an extra 2 weeks, or however long that is, by not tracking. One other thing that we haven't even talked about is the integration with Procore and how that's working. We've used Procore now for 8 years, and Procore is just such a great tool for us for all the documents and project management stuff. And the fact that Outbuild works so well with Procore, we're now working through all the submittals and things like that, attaching them to tasks, making sure that things are on site when we need them, or it'll create roadblocks, and just getting ahead of all those things that were not as easy to track before is a huge thing.
Would you say that we are helping your teams like save time every week based on what they used to do before?
Yeah, to an extent, but more so it's, our team's spending the time to do it, and to do something that, to update these schedules that will actually be used and be beneficial. So the time specifically to update the schedules is probably less, but the
quality of it,
right? Exactly.
That matters. And you feel that, so what I've been hearing, and I'm not trying to put words on what you said, but the key piece is, how do we get better at risk management and controlling our fate, right? If we collaborate better, we now have the ability to ensure the success of delivering the project on time, or maybe early, and within budget. And that is to you was the main driver as far as this, the end game needs to be this. It needs to be that we want to keep delivering projects on time, keep our customers happy, and have a decent fun time along the way, and not feel like we're working every weekend and it's a constant fight.
I think one of the other important things as a smaller growing general contractor is that we're creating processes that can be sustainable and that you can continue from every project. And so we can have the same processes on every single project, and it just streamlines everything. And when you hire new people, you bring new people in, all that, like as you grow, you can have these processes in place.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing that we will tell people when starting is, first thing is we need to establish the process. Then we'll train to the process, and then you'll see it'll become second nature. But there will be a month or 2 or 3 of change and learning and a bit of a growing pain. But what's 3 months of a transition versus the next 5 or 10 years of building projects the way you want to?
Exactly.
Awesome. Is there anything else you like to add? You know, it's been awesome to learn about your growth, and I think we sometimes hear a lot of companies your side, you know, not feeling that it will benefit because of the status quo, and getting your feedback as far as, you know, it doesn't matter how big or small you are, you know, a dollar is a dollar. And then if it helps make our team happier and collaborate better, and the whole point is let's build smarter and not feel like it's, you know, pulling teeth all along. That is beneficial because we know we'll have the benefits on our project, even at a smaller structure.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on that really stands out to me about Outbuild is that, you know, it's continually evolving and adapting to the user needs. And, you know, Outbuild, you know, it's so awesome to see. If you put in, you know, a ticket for something that doesn't seem to be working right for you, or suggestions on ways to improve, Outbuild is constantly updating and making improvements to it, which, you know, compared to a Microsoft project, I used it for 20 years. And the only changes that stand out in my mind are moving buttons around, but it's not becoming a better program. And you see Outbuild evolving, and it's so refreshing to know that it's continually getting better.
I mean, this is why we do what we do, right? Is we've had the similar pain as you guys had, and figure out we'll put a process to it, and we know we're only selling to, you know, the construction industry, the general contract. This is our partners. This is who we want to deliver value with. You know, Microsoft is a great tool. It served a purpose for a long time, and it still will, but it's not called Microsoft Construction Project, right? It's a general project management tool that is meant to be broad enough to be able to use by anybody. In our case, our success is the conversation we have like this today. Is, are we helping your teams being happy on a job site and maybe going home earlier and not stressing out because you have to work weekend? Like, deep down, that's what we care about. Well, of course, we're here to build a business and be successful, but happy customers such as you, Dave and Nick, is why we do everything we do and work those long hours, is because, well, there's, you know, you guys say, oh, we built that building, we're proud of it. For us is, look, that customer is using our product and is happy in building those buildings. And we're making a change and an impact on people's life, right? It's not life-changing, but to an extent, construction is hard enough. If we could make it a little easier for the people in the field, that's a big win for us.
Yep.
Thank you. This was great. I don't have anything else to add. I think this was a great conversation. It's always a pleasure to get to know more about the why and the how, because every company has a different pain point. It's similar, but I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.